gentleman yields, I'd like to recognize Mr. LaMalfa from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your gathering here today for us to be able to interact with you. I've made a couple of trips to the border, and today just underlines how futile what we're doing or what this federal government is doing is. It's appalling, and my wish is not to politicize this per se, but for President Biden to come on the TV and say, well, the Republicans could have been doing something about this hogwash. I mean, they held all three branches for from 2000 to 22. They could have done anything they want on the Democrat side with their dominance. Any legislation they wanted, they could have done it, all right? And so they did not act. Instead, they opened the gates even wider. And so to blame, you know, nobody wants to hear this partisan stuff, I get it. But you have to lay the problem where it is. So for us to be taking up this situation with Secretary Mayorkas, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a political stunt. You're going to impeach this guy, right? He's earned it, okay? He has lied to the public. He's lied to Congress. He has not done his job. No, maybe, you know what, rolls downhill. Maybe the orders are coming from the top. But he could do honorable things and either speak against it or resign himself if he finds what's going on, what his orders are so abhorrent. So we'll be doing that again this coming week, and maybe we can get our act together and actually see that through and make the statement on that and hold him accountable. That's what it's about. It's not a political stunt. So with that, I'm a farmer in Northern California in my real life, and I wanted to ask a couple questions of Mr. Bolts and one of Mr. Chilton as well. Mr. Chilton, let me start with you. Again, we were out there a minute ago looking at the fence line there, and all that material, all that fence material that we've paid millions and millions of dollars for, a lot of them have date codes on it. They're like from October or November of 2020, that material's been laying there. And so did I not hear there was a situation for a while where people with private property right up against the border, there was folks helping fund and put up fence on private lands and the ability to do that. Mr. Chilton, was that something that was offered to you or available to you, or has that since been tossed out by a court or something? Do you have that availability of somebody building privately and, you know, giving the funding to fence off your land?
The 5.5 miles of international border on my ranch is all federal land. The problem is they cross federal land and then cross my private property. Private people have a difficult time getting the approval of the federal government to put in walls.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I knew it was going to be tough. We still have these gaps in it, and we couldn't see them all where we were, but we know about them. On a previous trip down to the Yuma area, you could see the gaps. It's ridiculous. People just streaming across. Biden promised about 2 years ago, we're going to fill in the gaps. I guess they've done a little bit of it now, but it's ridiculous. Mr. Bolts, when you're talking about the people trampling through the fields there, I'd like to give you more time to emphasize on what the losses are on that, because, you know, in California, we implemented very tough phytotoxicity rules on the leafy green crops and such. They can't get anything on them. You know, they're even talking about putting, they've talked about screening over orchards there, so if birds are flying over, you don't get bird feces on the fruit and stuff like that. I mean, they don't live in the real world sometimes, but what do you have to deal with as far as the cost, the other preventative measures, because they're out there anyway in order to protect your crops and get your crops so they can pass health and food inspection to get them to market? And what is the cost to your industry?
Mr. Chairman, Representative LaMalfa, yeah, it is an extraordinary situation. Basically, if we have any animal or any human being, these are, you know, where pathogens come from, right? Human pathogens are carried by people, and they're carried by wildlife and domesticated animals. So we're very cognizant of it. We're evaluating fields before they're planted, at planting, during the growing of the crop. We're especially attentive, and then right immediately prior to harvest, evaluations happen. On a field-by-field basis, roughly an acre of fresh produce can be worth $5,000 to $6,000 before a knife is put to it and it's harvested. So we're obviously trying to make the best use that we can of what we
Are
have
you
to work.
talking for your industries, like are we talking tens of millions in losses? Are farmers looking at what they're dealing with there and saying, maybe I'm just not going to plant these particular crops by the border? That's the sort of things?
There are definitely some lands that are not put into fresh vegetable production. They're left in other crops for that specific reason. There's fencing going in. There's crop lost every year because of being not just physically trampled, but just when folks that are not properly trained enter a field, you have to section off that area of the field. It's an ongoing issue. Our particular issue is largest in the very western part of our county, on or near the Kokopah Reservation. There's no fencing on the Kokopah Reservation. That's a unique situation that really our State Department, the Kokopah tribe, it's not just a problem for us farmers that are farming Kokopah land. It's an extraordinary problem for the Border Patrol. There's a concentration of their resources dedicated there because of there being no wall. There is some Normandy fencing, but even that has been penetrated with vehicles running people and smuggling drugs. So it's an extraordinary problem. It's been going on for decades.
Okay, thank you. If you're not growing it here, and I'm not growing it in the Central Valley because they're taking the water away and giving it to fish, or in my district where the marijuana cartels, because of the border, are making water and land unusable, we got a gigantic problem. Thank you.
Gentlemen, time's